So if you've made it this far in the course, awesome job. You're learning a lot and you're on your way to becoming a JavaScript developer. What we are going to focus on now is using conditional statements. These are very important and they will make your programs run a lot more smoothly. For example, let's say our program was to ask somebody for their age, but let's say somebody writes their name instead. A conditional statement could be used to make your program behave differently depending on what the user types in the box. A simple condition could be something like, if the entered in text is an integer, then continue running the program. But if it is false, not an integer, then reprompt the user to enter a number. This is essentially what conditional statements are used for. In this lesson, we are going to create a simple program that will ask a user a question. If they get the answer right, they win. If not, they will lose. Let's walk through the process of how we would do this. In order to get started, we will ask our user a simple math question. Okay, so that's good to go. Now let's write out our conditional statement. Okay, so this might look a little bit weird, but don't worry. Once we walk through it, you will love and have a good solid understanding of what conditional statements are. Okay, so we have our if and some parentheses. Inside these parentheses is going to go our condition. Our condition will either be true or false. After our condition is a set of braces. Inside these braces will be our code if the conditional statement is true. This is also referred to as a coding block. You'll notice that this triple equal sign is called an equality operator and is basically saying if our variable ansel equals 4, then run the code in the curly braces that we were about to type out here. It is important that as you write out your code, that you make sure you indent your code. Everything you write in your if statement needs to be indented, just to make everything look clean and a little bit more easier to understand. So here we're writing an alert command, and if the user gets the answer right, we will tell them, good job, you answered the question correctly. And we are also going to display the actual answer, just to add a little bit of string here, just to make the program a little bit more interesting. We will also let the user know that they passed the test. Okay, now after that's all done, we're going to start writing out an else statement. This else statement will run the condition if the final value is false. So if our user does not type in the right answer, which is 4, then this code right here is going to run instead. After we finish our else statement, we will run the program twice, put the correct answer in so you can see what happens, and then purposely type in the wrong answer so you can see what happens if the user gets the question wrong. So if the user gets it right, our if statement will run, and if they get it wrong, then our else statement will run. Remember, if means true and else means false. Alright, so everything looks pretty good to go. Let's give this program a run and see what happens. Oh, We can see here that I forgot to add the starting of the curly bracelet in our else statement. So our coding block did not have the first curly braces to make it run. Alright, so our program should be good. So let's type in the correct answer first and see what happens. Alright, so we got the answer correct. Cool. Now let's rerun the program and put the wrong answer in. You can see here that the other condition is run and the user is let known that they didn't get it right. So this is essentially the power of conditional statements. Pretty cool. We can create different outcomes for our programs and different conditions that will run depending if our condition is true or false. In our next lesson, we are going to take a little bit of a break from coding and talk more about comparison operators, which determine whether a condition is true or false. Now you have a basic understanding of conditional statements, and you can start adding more depths and layers to your programs. One thing I'm going to point out and really stress is that the outcome for a conditional statement, no matter how complicated it might be, is either yes or no, or in programming we call this true or false. Let's talk a little bit about equality operators. Now I showed you the triple equals conditional operator, but there are many more we can use, and here are some examples. Like always, check the external links for reference in regards to this. Let's take a look at some live examples of a few equality operators in action. Try to guess what they mean and think of some unique ways you can use them in your programs. Are they true, or is the outcome false? For this example, 5 is less than 6, therefore the condition is true. In this one, 5 does not equal 6, therefore the condition is false. In this case, the triple equals operator means that the number must be the same as well as the type. Since here we are displaying a 6 string and a 6 integer, this is actually considered false. In this example, we have a 7 that is either greater or equal to 5. In our case, 7 is greater than 5, so the condition is true. One thing to note is that a number is always less than a letter, and when you compare two words together, JavaScript will take the first letters of the two words and use the alphabet to rank them as being less or greater than each other. When it comes to the equal operator, the double equals is slightly different than the triple. The main difference is that the double equals will allow a string and an integer to be true, while the triple operator will need to have matching values and matching types as well. Generally speaking, most people will use the triple operator just because it is more precise. Well, that's pretty much it for this lesson. Try experimenting with different types of equality operators in your programs so that you can get a better feel for how they work. A funny word you have probably never even heard of might be Boolean. If you have done some programming before, however, you might have heard it here and there. A Boolean is basically the value of either true or false in a conditional statement. Remember we have strings and numbers? Well, now you know what Booleans are. A Boolean value is either true or false. This is a third type of value in JavaScript. Let's go over some pieces of code that will help you understand how Booleans work a little bit better. We can also add a variable to a Boolean value. Let's do this and build an example in a program of how this might work. So by default, we can see here that our variable is set to false. Once the user guesses the right answer, the value turns to true. We then check again to see if the value is true, and if it is true, we run our second conditional statement. If not, we just simply run our else statement. Now, this might seem a little bit weird, and I understand. This is a lot of code, especially from what we have covered earlier. But if you break the code up into chunks, it is much easier to understand. In this lesson, you learned how to use variables with Boolean values and explore a different way of creating a program in JavaScript. In the next lesson, you will learn how to add comments to your JavaScript code to make it easier to work and read your JavaScript programs. Once you start working with JavaScript more and more, you will find that larger pieces of code will naturally become easier to read. There will be times, however, when sometimes code will be just too confusing to read. This is where comments come in handy. Comments are a way for you to leave handy notes for yourself or perhaps another developer who will be working with your code in the future. We can use comments to organize code or perhaps explain a long conditional statement or just put it in easier to understand wording. It's well worth it to take the extra time to add comments to your code, especially as a beginner, because as you are new with programming or working with JavaScript, you're going to learn a lot, and things you made, a couple weeks or months ago might not make sense when you come back to them. There are two ways we can make comments in JavaScript. We can do single line comments, like I'm showing here, with 2 forward slashes. Anything we write after the slashes will be comments. You can see in my Notepad++ editor, the comments turn green. So these comments are simply ignored by the browser and they're just there for us to view. Multiple line comments must be written as follows. First, we make a forward slash, and then we add an asterisk after it. So we can see here that when you first make our start of our multi-line comment, everything is greened out until we add the ending of the multi-line comment, which is an asterisk and a forward slash. So we can see here that this whole section is commented out and it will simply be ignored. So we're going to add the ending of our multi-line comment so that we just want this from the start into the end. So as you work with your code and as you get more familiar with JavaScript, you're going to be using comments a lot. So for here, we could do something like take our variable score and add a comment that says the user's score. And since we have all these questions here, we could do something like add a comment for each question. We can make our programs even more advanced by adding in extra tests into our program. For example, let's say we wanted to make a program that checked for a user's age and then asked for their gender. Let's say that we were creating an ad that only targeted males over the age of 18. In order for our program to run successfully, both tests need to return the value of true. The operator that we are going to be using in order to achieve this is the AND operator represented by 2 ampersands. So let's say that we wanted to make a program that only worked if the age of the user was between 20 and 50. Here's the code that we could use to achieve that. What this is checking for is if the visitor's age is greater than 20 but also less than 50. Both have their own true and false values, but since we are combining them together, they both need to be true in order for the program to run. In other words, for both to be true, the user's name needs to be between 20 and 50. Now we know how to check a condition to make sure that multiple tests are true in order for it to run. But what if we had a program and we only need one test out of, let's say, 3 to be true in order for it to run? For this, we would use the OR operator. Let's say an example, we want to target people aged either 20 or 25. Either or age will work in our situation. So let's take a look at a piece of code that will actually work this way. What this line of code is saying is that if our visitor's age is equal to 20 or 25, then this test equals true. With this operator, we just need one test to be true in order for our program to run. If one of these conditions is true, then the whole condition as a whole is true as well, even if one of them ends up being false. So going back to the start, let's create a statement that will only run if our user is male, but also over the age of 19. Remember, because we need both conditions to be true for our program to run, we need to use the AND operator. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a variable and prompt the user and ask them for their gender. Now, before we create our second variable, we're going to have to do something to our gender variable. Because our visitor might type in gender with capital letters or type in gender with one capital letter, we're going to have to take that value from that string and send it to all lowercase just in case if our user types gender with a capital letter or uses all caps. We still want this program to work. We're adding extra functionality by doing this. So whatever the user types their gender, it's going to then be created to all lowercase. So then we create our variable visitor's age. Again, we will prompt our user asking them for their age. Okay, so we're ready to start our conditional statement. So we'll start off by typing if. What we're going to do is write our visitor's gender equals male. Remember to use the triple equals operator. And because we're sending our string to lowercase, we need to make sure that this value is all in lowercase. After that, we put in an operator, and we're going to write in visitor's age. And this needs to equal to the value of 19, or over the age of 19. So we'll make a greater than or equal to 20. So again, this is a little bit lots to take in, but just read it through slow and practice it, and you will understand everything that it means. Now we need both these conditions to be true in order for our program to run. So now we're going to actually write our code that happens if the conditional statement is true. So we're just going to put an alert box and type in a message here that's going to let our visitor know that they are qualified for our free offer. Now, if the visitor is not a male, or let's say they're not the age of 19 or older, then this is the code that's going to be outputted. Now keep in mind, because both conditions need to be true, a visitor can be male, but if their age is not over 19, then the program again is not going to be true. And we're going to run through this example a couple times just to show you the different outcomes of what will happen. So I think our program is pretty much good to go. So we're going to give it a run and see what happens. Just going to adjust everything a little bit better here so you guys can see the screen. Alright, so something's not happening here. There's an error in our code. Aha! I forgot to put an equal sign for our first variable. Okay, so now we run the program and now we can see that it works. So let's type in our gender. I'm going to go with male. Notice that I type it in capital letters because I want to demonstrate you that the two lowercase function will let our program run true. And we can see here that when both values are true, the program runs correctly. If we type in male, but let's say we're not over the age of 19, the program will not run. It will be false. Again, if we type in female and we're not over the age of 18, or even if we are, the program is still going to run false. Both conditions in our case need to be true. So this is the cool thing about adding multiple tests to a single condition in a JavaScript program. We can add many depths and layers to our programs and make them run a lot better by doing so. We're almost done working with conditional statements. Let's get ready for the conditional statement challenge. Welcome to the conditional statement challenge. Are you ready to do some coding? For this challenge, you're going to make a quiz program that asks the user 3 simple math questions. You're going to need to create a variable that keeps track of the user's score. You're also going to need to make a conditional statement that tells the user they passed if they scored 2 or 3 questions right. If the user scored less than 2, then they failed the quiz. Create a conditional statement for each question that tells the user if they got the answer right or wrong. This is going to be a lot of coding, but I think you can do that. Take everything we applied in this course and in this section and do the best that you can do. If you need help or you have any errors, join me in the next video where I walk through this process step by step. Good luck, everybody. Let's do some programming. Okay, so let's get started with working on our conditional statement quiz program. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a variable for our scores. We're going to call it user score, and we're going to set this variable to 0 to start off with. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable for our first question, and I'm going to prompt the user the question. I'm just going to create a couple simple questions here, nothing too crazy, just to show you guys the way this program would work. Your question can be whatever you like. After we create our variable and prompt our user for the question, we will create our if statement. We'll make sure that the user's answer has to equal the correct answer. And then, if the user gets the answer correct, remember that we need to let the user know. So, in my case, I'm just going to use the alert command. You could use a document.write command, whatever you prefer. But we'll create an alert command and tell the user that, hey, you got the answer correct, good job. If the user entered in the wrong answer, then we will use an else statement to tell the user that they got the answer wrong. So if the user gets the question right, then our alert command will run. We also need to add in our variable score, and what happens here is make sure you put this in the if part of the box, because what this is saying is if the user gets the answer right, then give them 1 point. Take the variable of user score and combine it with 1, and since it starts off with 0, it just turns to 1. Finally, we put our else statement in. And I'm just going to make a simple alert command here and write something like, sorry, you got the answer wrong, please try again. Once we have the basis of our first question, what we can actually do is we can actually copy this whole section here and paste it 3 times and just change the contents in our question to make 3 separate questions. This saves us a lot of time on coding and retyping everything out 3 times. So I'm going to create a little bit of space here. I'm going to add our 3 questions. Most of the content here can stay the same, but what we're going to need to do is we're going to create a new variable for each question. And we're, of course, going to have to actually change our question. So our quiz program is a little bit more challenging. Instead of asking the same question 3 times, that would be a little bit too easy. And finally, we're going to do it to our third question here. We're going to create a new variable, and again, make sure the variable matches our if statement, and then change our question to be something completely different. We'll do an adding question, a multiplying question, and a simple division question. Alright, so if it looks pretty good up here, first we have our variable score starting out with 0. We have our first question. If the user gets it right, they score 1 point. We have our second question. Again, if the user gets it right, they score another point. And our third question. If the user gets it right, they score a 3rd point. Look at our score. We need to make sure that our score command is being updated in the if statement of every question. And then finally, what we're going to do at the end here is going to write a conditional statement that's going to look at the user's score. And if they scored 2 or 3, then the user has passed the quiz. If they scored less than 2, then they failed the quiz. So we're going to have to use our AND operator. Or actually, in this case, we use the OR operator. Because what we're saying here is if the user scored 2 or 3, we can use that. And if the user did score 2 or 3, then the result will be true, and then we can write something like, hey, you passed the test. Good job. And then for our else statement, we can write something like, if the user's score equals less than 2, then the user failed. And we will write something like, Or we can just write a simple else statement. Since we only have two possible outcomes here, we can just write a true statement, and then we can just write an else statement. If we had more than two outcomes, then we would have to add the less than two. But in this case, we can just add a simple else statement since our program is pretty simple, and it should run fine. So this is going to look a little bit confusing. We have a lot of conditional statements here, but this is a great way to understand how conditional statements work in JavaScript. Let's add some comments to our code. I'm going to add a comment here that's going to let our developer, whether it be ourselves or somebody else, know that this section right here is taking the user's score and telling them if they passed or failed. I'm also going to add a comment up here that's going to let us know that this is what the user's score is, and we're setting it to 0. Lastly, I'm going to create some comments that are going to let us know where each question is in the code. So if we ever have to edit question 1, question 2, question 3, we can take a quick little look at our comments and know exactly where they are in our code. Alright, so our code is looking not too bad. It's organized half decently. And I think we're almost ready to give it a go to see if it works. Let's give it a save, and let's run the program. Oh, like usual, we have a syntax error. Let's look at our program and see if we can find out what it is. If you ever get in a situation where you can't figure out what the code error is in your program, you can always go to the developer console, remember, and you can look for the error. So we can see we have a syntax error. If we click here, we can actually see in our code where our error is. Pretty cool, right? So we can see here that we actually didn't write our question in a string. Forgot to put our quotations here. Pretty simple mistake, right? But with the JavaScript console, we can actually narrow it down. So if you look through your code and you're just having trouble, before you get frustrated, try to use a JavaScript console to find out what your error is. So we're going to have to go through our questions and change our text into strings. Then we can save our code, and let's see if it works. Alright, our program is working. So let's try to get all questions right and see what happens. Okay, so we got all 3 questions right, and we passed the quiz. Awesome. Now I'm going to purposely get a couple questions wrong here. So let's run the code again and see what happens when we get only 2 questions right. Oh, something's going on here. We're writing the wrong question, but we're still getting the answer right. So we have a mistake in our code. Let's take a look and see what's happening this time. Ah, I can see the problem here. We forgot to use our strict equal to operator here. Remember with the triple equals? We just put the 1 equals, so that's the syntax error. So now we're going to add that in, and I think our program is almost perfect. Let's give it a go and see if it works. Alright, we can see that when we do type in the wrong answer, we actually get a message saying we typed in the wrong answer. Oh, we got the wrong answer again. Let's try this one more time. Alright, so we can see that our program is working correctly. If a user fails, they get prompted to rerun the program and see if they can pass. Now, we are getting another error where what's happening is, because we use the triple equals operator, if the user types in 4 as a string, it's not actually correct because we're not converting our integer into a string. So we're going to have to change our equal to actually be a string. So we can see we did it with the other ones, but question 1 we forgot to do. So we'll type in 4 here. And there you go, we can see that it's now correct. This is the power of troubleshooting your program. As your programs get bigger and complex, you need to troubleshoot them and try to figure out the possible ways your programs to run. Because when you first start off, you're probably going to make a lot of syntax errors. It's a good idea to go back through your code and try to achieve each outcome in your code. This is called debugging and testing your program. We can see here that our program is operating 100%. It took a little bit of time,